My name is Mark. This is Zen Talk, and today we're talking about karma and rebirth. So, what is karma? Well, basically, karma is defined as the spiritual cause and effect. But what exactly creates karma? What are we really talking about here? And if you really were to look deep into a lot of the books and scriptures and what people think of karma, it really boils down to it is mental habits that afflict your actions. And by a habit, it's you could say it's almost like an unconscious doing. Sort of like when somebody has the habit of smoking cigarettes, they will almost unconsciously light a cigarette, and then at times they will almost what seems to be to light another cigarette unconsciously. And this is something that the mind will do. It's sort of a doing without thinking. It's like a program that's running behind the scene doing things, but you have no idea that it's there, except that when you catch it, you say, "Why am I doing this? What brings me to this particular action every single time?" So these actions that you perform from the mental habits, they affect yourself and others. And these can be detrimental actions or they can be beneficial actions. But most of the time, when we're talking about karma, and especially in the Buddhist area, we are mostly talking about mental habits that are a hindrance, mental habits that create suffering. So these external actions that you perform that affect you and others can create suffering, and then they often do create suffering. So generally, karma it is looked at as neutral, and the outcomes and the future effects really cannot be known. It's not You cannot say that one action will absolutely create another action, or the karma generated by a habit always goes in this direction. We just don't know that. Yet people may assign actions or characteristics to an action in saying that, oh, it's a beneficial action creates good karma, negative actions create bad karma. And sometimes these actions are called merits or demerits, or meritorious actions or unmeritorious actions. And sometimes you also hear these as skillful and unskillful as well. So I often feel that when you're engaging in a lot of talk of good karma, bad karma, it tends to be a goad. That's a goad as a sharp stick to guide people to the path of morality and law abiding, which in itself is conducive to a civil society and the cessation of suffering overall. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily the Buddhist thing either. All right, so there is a definite link between karma, that I said is the habituations of mind, and rebirth. And so rebirth, which is a controversial subject in Western Buddhism, as well as the existence of karma. But rebirth is what happens when the habituated mind at death of the body. So this is where these unconscious programming, that's at least that's the best I can describe it, this habituated mind that we have created, or that has come to us, or that existed. Because sometimes people will perform habits that they have no idea where they came from. And sometimes in a child, people will say, "Wow, we just have no idea why he's so scared of something," or "We just have no idea why he behaves that way." And that's usually habitual mind at work from a prior lifetime. And We don't know what lifetime. It could have been the last lifetime, could have been the last 100 lifetimes. But generally, habitual mind, when moving through the cycle of rebirth, kind of retains the same shape, the same habits, and the same actions. So the habituated mind can be that of like sensual desires, a sensual desire for certain textures, or sensual desires for pleasure or smells or for touches. This could even be rolled up to become a sexual desire, more of a physical sexual desire. The habituated mind to emotional desires. Some people just really the mind is always wanting to be, or has a thirst for a particular emotion, whether it be love or rage or hate can be a desire too. These emotional desires that come up can be very powerful, and the habituated mind can not only seek to create these situations, but also seek to be in these situations as much as it can. And this can definitely cause, just as the sensual desires the emotional desires can create intense suffering. It's the suffering when you are lacking the situation, and then and then there's also another suffering of when you're in the situation that it's going to end. So the mind can also be habituated to an environmental desires, having a place or an environment of a particular quality. And again, the suffering is when you're not in that environment, and the suffering is when you are in the environment and you know it will end. And also, lastly, the mind can be habituated to visual and audio desires. This could be pleasant views, particular colors, sounds, instruments, frequencies. These are not by, but these are only, I would say, the top four. There could definitely be many, many more. So that is what the habitual mind basically can be. It's the karma that has been created and runs in the background of our, what I would call the forefront mind, this mind that that say you call yourself, but there's a lot of habits behind that we, as Buddhists, attempt to uncover and attempt to eradicate. So by ending the habitual mind, we end the creation of karma and thus end the cycle of rebirth. This is really the Buddhist practice in a nutshell. And when you end even one thread of habitual mind, and sometimes it's only just one habit, a lot of times it's multiple habits, but usually one habit, there's one big one. And when you can grab that big habitual mind and really tame it, really quench it, then relinquish it and let it go, and see the truth of it, see that it's just nothing but desire and falseness and illusion, you end that karma, and then you stop creating new karma. When you have ended that habitual mind, the creation of karma also ceases, and thus the cycle of rebirth is ended. And then we use basically from the teachings of the Buddha, we're talking now about the Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha of this Kalpa, on the way out. That more or less would be the, Brahmayana, the way out, the way to Brahma. So we go to the Four Noble Truths, which would be the origins of suffering. And this is a foundational document. And then we go to the Noble Eightfold Path, which would be more or less the original Buddhism on the way out. And then we go to the Bodhisattva path, which is what I am on, and which mostly this is talking about Zen and Vajrayana here, and that would be the Mahayana Buddhism. So, to end the mind habits and thus ending the cycle of rebirth is the position of the Arhat, the enlightened one, the non-returner. And this is more or less what the Buddhist disciple is practicing for and is striving for now. What is the practice? The practice is to uncover and have a direct understanding of your habitual mind. We don't care about the teacher's habitual mind or the habitual mind of the other students. We only care about our own habitual mind. What is it that is creating karma in our life? What is it that is creating suffering in our life? What is it that's creating suffering that I experience, and then I leak outwards? I create waves of suffering around me that affect myself and everybody. And we look inward to find the habituated mind. We then preach the Dharma to it, which is the truth of the universe. We then relinquish and abandon the habitual mind, and thus the end of karma, and thus the end of the cycle of rebirth, and then we become the Arhat, the spiritually enlightened and the non-returner. This is a doable thing. Do not let anybody tell you that it's not true, that it's false, and it can't be done, because it can be done. Absolutely can be done. So there was a lot of myths and superstitions around what karma is. There's a lot of fantasy views about karma. So karma cannot be transferred to another sentient being. This is insane when people talk about transferring karma or transferring merit. Karma cannot be put into an object. You can't touch a cup or a gem or something like that and put karma into it. That does not happen. Nobody can take karma from you. A teacher, a guru, even another Buddha cannot take karma from you, and this is well stated in the sutras. And karma is not permanent. That would be getting into eternalism or annihilationism, and those are two aspects that the Buddha fully rejected. These two. So karma is not something that is permanent. It can be uncovered, and it can be rooted out, and it can be abandoned and relinquished. So it's not permanent by any shot. So let's talk about the soul a little bit here. So the soul, in some ways, can be the habituated energies or the mind of habituation. And some Buddhist sects get into what's called Magick. And so the Tibetans intentionally habituate the mind to certain sounds, smells, sights, and tastes to ensure a rebirth in a region that they control. And this is very interesting to go through these processes of the habituation, which usually starts at a very young age. And they usually do this for the Rinpoches, the Tukus, and those that they have declared to be emanations or reincarnations of past teachers. And thus they kind of go into a mystical lineage in where their teachers are thought to be, their interpretation of the Bodhisattva path is that the teacher returns to the people in the next rebirth, and they do this through the intentional habitation of mind. They create habits. They create such an impression in the mind of the person to sound, sight, smells, taste, that that energy stream will reincarnate in a very particular area. Because if you only have a certain area that you're doing something, and nobody else in the entire world or universe is doing that thing, it's gonna pull that habituated mind right into that region for rebirth. This is their view of the Bodhisattva path. And it is absolutely magic. But this is nothing that the Buddha taught, and this is not anything that you're going to read in any sutras, but it is what they do. And it's not something that I particularly would strive to do, but if this is, some people look at this and they look at this as a means of immortality, which I guess one could look at it that way, but it's not really the Buddhist path. And even the Tibetans will admit to you that the Vajrayana, the way that they look at rebirth and karma, is not the Buddhist path. So, just a few conclusions here. The proper understanding of karma and this rebirth is critical for anyone who desires to be a disciple of the Buddha. That's, more or less being a Buddhist. That we can go on very long discussions of karma and very long discussions of rebirth. What I have talked about is the core, is the very basics of this discussion. And you really have to be sound in your mind as to what exactly these are. Because if you say, well, I don't believe in karma or I don't believe in rebirth, you're basically saying you're not a Buddhist and that you're not a disciple of the Buddha. People who declare themselves to be secular Buddhist only see Buddhism in the realms of psychology and moralism, and that is also not being a Buddhist either. As Buddhists, we strive to end the cycle of rebirth, and I cannot strive this anymore. This is so critical. And ending the streams of karma. That's how we do this by. So we end the cycle of rebirth by ending the streams of karma through the Eightfold Path. And I'll say this again. As Buddhists, we strive to end the cycle of rebirth by ending the streams of karma through the Eightfold Path. And I'll quickly go through the practice again. The practice is we uncover the habitual mind that is creating the cycle of rebirth. By uncovering the habitual mind, we can then relinquish and abandon those mindsets, and thus ending the streams of karma. And we do this by engaging the teachings of the Eightfold Path. That is how we do it. So you can see my video on the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths for further instruction. So this ends my talk on karma and rebirth, though it's very short. I could probably go into hours and hours and hours of talk in this direction, but I think it's best that you yourself look into your own habitual mind and view the karma that you are creating and the suffering that you create for yourself and others, and then take a moment of practice to identify, to preach Dharma to your own habituated mind, to end the stream of karma that is creating suffering, and thus ending the cycle of rebirth, and then you become the Arhat. All right, well, thank you for listening to my presentation, and please remember to like and subscribe.